8 innocent people were abandoned to perish. Broken, poisoned souls left on a trash-like dirt road with no food or water. Only suffering and solitude, with no one pausing. Prior to his training, a former U.S. Marine, for battle, now confronted with he never anticipated aid on the battlefield. Dying pets, the subsequent events will create. You weep and regain your faith in miracles. Tell me where you are before we begin. Seeing from the drop your nation in the comments. I'm interested in seeing how far this tails, and if you have faith in second opportunities for those who think that animals get love instead of grief by subscribing. Button because of what's going to be heard will always be with you as a subscriber is equivalent to a gift that he wasn't. He was not seeking to be a hero for anything that Jake Thompson actually possessed. Retired from combat years ago, yet he had never left the battlefield after completing 2 U.S. deployments in Afghanistan. Marine, he came home in a different. Peace wasn't brought by the medals on his shelf. The silence was greater, and the evenings were longer, more explosive than any he had ever heard, so he relocated to a tiny town's outskirts in Texas's rural areas, where nobody inquired, where the territory was expansive, and the rustle of the trees, and Jake remained silent despite the distant coyote bark. He didn't go out much unless absolutely necessary. The usual chop gave him comfort. Wooden fences all follow the same route. Morning, but that path that morning wasn't the same. He became aware of it the moment he rounded the old gravel's bend. Road next to the creek initially seemed a stack of black sacks dumped like rubbish by a person who is too indolent to visit the rubbish, but something didn't feel quite right. The air was calm as well as he saw a big, quivering paw sticking out of one. Jake froze his training because of the baggage. Kicking in, he moved carefully toward the heart. Thumping, the stench hit him as he approached. He reached for his chemically sharp, unnatural down, and as soon as his hand made contact with the sack, it made a faint whimper. Jake could be heard tearing the package open. A German shepherd created a foaming sound at the body convulsing, lips rolling back, eyeballs rolling. Venom, he fell on the ground and there were more bags 123 when I looked around. Jake ripped through all 8 of them. His heart is breaking one by one with each whimper each time your air catches were unconscious, and one appeared to have already left. Another gave a feeble bark before collapsing completely. Young German shepherds were beaten and hungry. Although they were taught to be faithful, they had been deceived by someone who had desired them to. Jake stood motionless, gazing at the 8 broken in the wake of human cruelty. He didn't leave the dogs in the dirt alone. He hesitated but didn't ask because a voice muttered from somewhere deep inside. The voice of the person who left no trace was the person who dragged his squad leader, Cobble the One and Jake from the debris. Jake stood, who didn't make it home, wasn't abandoning his truck here, roared to life, and outpaced him in his driving. Had one hand on the wheel for years. Another one is carrying a lame shepherd puppy. The veterinary clinic was enveloped in his coat. Every road bump was felt from a distance of 22 miles. Every second like a hammer to the ribcage. Counted, he stormed into the clinic. Dirt-covered doors, and fear please poison, the receptionist leaped. My truck has 8 dogs. Hurried, Dr. Lily Morgan, a 40-year-old woman with years of expertise and steely nerves, didn't inquire. She just looked in Jake's eyes, and they fled outside. Spent hours cleaning stomachs, using activated charcoal. Jake didn't receive oxygen drip injections. He paced and prayed, leaving their side. Was not the youngest of the 2 begged. Jake, who was only a few months old, didn't cry. He just held them. In a decade, but on that day, he completed 6. Barely made it, Dr. Morgan glanced at him. They need days of care since they are weary. continuous observation of antibiotic fluids. Jake, there's going to be a fight. She blinked at you and nodded. I'll do it. Preparing to care for 6 poisoned German shepherds who had been terrified by an "Hold on, do you even have room?" Provides funds, he shrugged. I have room. Jake, I'll work out the rest that evening. Transformed his peaceful cabin into a battlefield. He didn't use water containers, towels, or blankets. He checked on each dog every hour as they slept. He gave them the name of the woman with the deep hope, the silent one, wound over her leg. Ghost the fiercest, lacking one ear. A man who continued to bark while throwing up. The oldest one, Bravo, has weary eyes. Sarge, the bashful person who wouldn't look up. Luna and the persistent crawler. Scout, each name conveyed a message toward him. Significance from his brother's past. In arms during Jake's first 48 hours. Didn't talk or eat, he just gave a damn. Hope attempted to endure as the ghost started to. He waggled his tail as Jake passed. Sarge snarled at everyone except Jake. At last, protecting watchful Luna drank water on her own. It was a small step forward, brittle yet genuine compared to the nightmare. Began with the dogs whimpering in Jake's absence. The trembling at night when hiding beneath furniture. Jake was accidentally bitten by Ghost one night, believing that Jake was attacking him. Didn't squirm or shout. He simply sat on the ground and bided their time until Ghost, whimpering, Jake slid into his lap, muttered, "It's all right, I understand." Because he was aware of your fear. The memories of the powerlessness he was aware of. Precisely what they were experiencing. The cabin that used to be silent now reverberated with the clawing and barking of paws. Jake's chuckle was something much more. He hadn't spoken to his neighbors in years. Began to hear tales about the veterinarian posting a Facebook photo of Jake encircled. By the time the 6 shepherds recovered, it went, Germans were poisoned by viral marine rescues. A combat soldier becomes the caretaker of shepherds. Angel to mistreated canines, from military personnel to Savior. Jake was indifferent to the headlines, and he was glad that Bravo at last ate so much that Luna gave her a hug. When the scout saw him, his tail barked, and suddenly the man who returned, believing he had nothing left to do after the war, learned that rescuing them was. The early mornings were what rescued him, not because of Jake's warning, but since 6 injured people relied on him to live, and in some way that accountability began to stitch something that had been inside of him, damaged for years. Yet as they wounds started to mend, the spirits of the past crept back, not only for Jake, but it also began for the pets. Bravo, the most powerful of the 6, protect her. But Jake discovered him one morning, trembling and hiding in the corner, furiously flashed his teeth in fear at nothing was there, no threat, no sound, only memories that no one can see, except from those who have experienced them. Jake didn't attempt to coerce anything. He simply laid down next to Bravo, speaking softly, "Now it's just the 2 of us. I assure you that you are safe." Well done. Remain there. But Jake remained, for he knew it was hours before the shaking ceased. He had already visited Jake, had a bad dream the night he returned, trapped in a fallen building in Afghanistan, building following an IED explosion underneath. He could still hear his convoy. His teens yelling is still audible, burning, and still feel the burden of. His chest was covered with concrete, but this time when he was not awake when he woke up, gasping in the dark. Scout had climbed onto his bed by himself, not barking while observing without fear. I assumed that Jake blinked, tears in his eyes. The following haunts us both. Days, Jake started to notice things that Luna had previously declined to pass. Any door that slammed would make a ghost snarl. Whenever someone wearing a baseball cap arrived, nearly all hope would vanish when they saw. These metal chains weren't only oddities. These were recollections of the suffering of torture and abuse, followed by the queries: who poisoned, ate, and who did this? German shepherds that are purebred and bagged, dumps them on a back like trash. Jake's marine instinct on the path to death started because he desired justice, but he didn't seek personal retribution. He began to inquire because he wanted it for them. Quietly, local veterinarians and animal control shelters, followed gradually by a terrible pattern, appeared in the last 12 months. German illegal shepherd breeding was taking place in a backyard business close to a puppy mill, unregistered and concealed, used for financial abuse. When sales were slow and when the operation failed, they disposed of the dogs, and Jake's hands were all clenched when the narrative was told to him. But what broke him when he realized something? Furthermore, these canines weren't merely the victims of mistreatment when they trusted a loved one, someone, and they were deceived in return, the greatest betrayal to a Marine. Jake was unable to comprehend how those devoted eyes might be looked into and observe a throwaway item. He created a quiet promise that you won't ever be abandoned. Once more, the days stretched into weeks, started to mend the ghost snarling. Jake would be nudged by every sound Sarge made, and each morning as a custom, and something lovely occurred. The community sparked by Jake's widely shared tale began to arrive, and people brought food, blankets, cash, and even custom dog beds, with their names sewn into a female. Drove 3 hours from Dallas just to give a hug. Jake and leave behind etched collars. Shows the names of each retiring canine dog. A child received training equipment from an officer. Sent a letter to Jake, thanking him for, "I aspire to be like you in preserving the dogs." When Mia was 8 years old, Jake sobbed, reading that made him feel less like a heroic figure, yet for the first time in a long time, felt observed. One evening at a all 6 dogs cuddled together during the thunderstorm. In Jake's bed, each lightning strike delivered. Luna, the ghost beneath the duvet, whined till Jake dropped his head down and whispered to her scout, steadily and warmly on Jake's chest, and Jake came to the realization that they weren't simply recovering as a result of him. He was healing as a result of what they'd brought, returning him from a location that no one else could, from the quiet of being alone during a conflict that didn't truly end, but destiny wasn't completed. Evaluating them yet one afternoon, Jake was in the yard exercising the dogs. Observe Hope's misstep, which wasn't the type of misstep due to anything else or a weak leg. She coughed one more before collapsing. Jake hurried to the veterinarian for blood work. X-ray examinations. Dr. Morgan entered the chamber. "She's relapsing, her eyes heavy. We didn't notice the internal damage before the poisoning-induced liver failure." Jake's knees dropped down as it's catching up. The first one he discovered was the feeble Hope. "Fighter," the veteran went on, "we must begin treatment right away. It will be quite costly, and there's no..." Make sure Jake didn't blink or do anything else. She nodded. "Are you certain?" He looked Hope's eyes as she lay on the table, meeting his still trusting. She continued to fight and never gave up. Jake didn't give up on her that evening. Hope was on for the lone patient in the clinic. He clutched her paw as her breathing became shallow. "You're not a mistake," I whispered. "Your family, not trash. And nobody one is abandoned." He remained with her during the night and right before sunrise. She licked his hand and opened her eyes. The hospital's lights were dark, and there was silence. Crisp and, for the first time in many years, Jake prayed for others, not for himself. Pardon, but for one dog, one broken. When morning came, a warrior named Hope was still weak and breathing, but alive. The veterinarian was taken aback. "Dr. Morgan remarked on how she managed to go through." Jake grinned and shed tears as she shook her head. I look into his eyes, and her name is Hope. The other 5 shepherds were at the ranch. The door was patrolled by a restless spirit. Every Bravo refused to eat for an hour. Even Sarge, the Jake had a rough one who complained while he slept. Never witnessed a dog in mourning, but he saw. He sensed it now as well, but they weren't. There were only 6 rescued dogs left. A family, a pack, and when all of them were absent, Jake posted an online update. The post became viral once more. But it got to someone this time. Unexpectedly, an ex-K9 named Thomas, Jake's former comrade and handler from the. He contacted Marines right away, and I saw the. Jake hadn't said anything after I drove down. In years, they had lost a lot to Thomas, collectively, but this time they were related too. Thomas came to reclaim something, riding the following day in a vehicle loaded with toys are supplemented by gear training devices, with a huge liver support pouch. Let's get to work, he said, saying. Jake had a smile, but it wasn't that big. During the course of the upcoming weeks, the ranch changed, turning into a. Thomas, the rehabilitation center, showed Jake how to design obstacle courses for K9 South in the. They constructed ramps, tunnels, and transmitted traces so the dogs wouldn't be trained to help, but to teach them to trust once more. Scott took the initiative first, conquered the challenges in a day, after which he started urging the others in their direction. Was like to witnessing trauma unfold. Pursued her initial ball and, in fact, returned it, and the ghost ceased to flinch. Whenever Jake held up his hand, Sarge, barking playfully, the first Jake had heard of Bravo's struggles, stood near the course's edge and simply seen Jake approach and get down on his knees. You don't have to be strong, he said. No longer, he muttered. It's acceptable to. Bravo glanced at him and said, play now. When he initially waggled his tail, Hope's health started to get better in the interim. Hour by hour, day by day she made. Wait, her coat started to gleam once again. Jake took her outside in the morning, and the whole pack ran over and surrounded her, joyful licking, barking, and whining. Jake saw Scout's heart racing. He bent his head and gave her a little prod. She took one step forward, then another. Then she ran, but it wasn't quick, elegant, but it was freedom. Jake collapsed to his knees in tears after winning. You've returned that. Thomas had a moment captured on camera. After it was videotaped and uploaded, it went. Millions watched, millions everywhere. Weeping, thousands of people messaged Jake with. Hope was the only word before the letters arrived. Veterans mistreat survivors, including prisoners in. The inmates all say the same thing. If those dogs can recover, perhaps I can. Jake, one evening, while sitting in his hut, he read one of those letters as soon as Thomas entered. You are aware of what you have created here, correct? Jake surveyed the handcrafted kennels at the new donation boxes, medical equipment that had been delivered anonymously at the sleeping pets. Calmly beside the hearth, I didn't, Jake whispered, build it, and they did. But one night, not everything was behind them. Jake heard someone knocking on the door. It was the same deputy, Officer Reyes, who had, the night he discovered the poison, he called in. Dogs, we found them, she said gravely. Those who ran the puppy, she remarked. Mill, Jake's chest constricted. The property was raided, and everything was worse than we believed. That many of animals were undernourished. Some people mistreated it, so Jake clenched. Will they be punished for his fists? Charged, but they requested a plea. They said the dogs were never in agreement. They're concerned that they were abandoned by someone else. Jake's eyes grew gloomy. They are lying. We need witness, even though we know, she responded. Any proof that Jake gazed out at his bed is occupied by 6 German shepherds. Porch, he was aware of his next course of action. Jake composed a statement in the morning and delivered it. Images, movies, timelines, and veterinary records. He openly testified on their behalf. He stood in court and informed everyone of what had occurred. He wasn't merely battling for, he was battling for each and every soul that had ever been discarded, and at the time he In that courtroom, Hope's name was spoken by the, "You named her Hope?" asked the judge, posing. The Jake nodded when the judge said, "She earned it." The abuser's trial garnered media attention, were found guilty, and the operation was closed down, and Jake rose to national prominence. Of atonement, yet he showed little concern for. Fame was the only thing he cared about, giving them the life they were destined to. After a month, something occurred. Jake didn't anticipate a foundation offered to help him turn his property into a recognized haven for victims of abuse. German shepherds, as well as veterans. Jake's recovery from PTSD was acknowledged with one condition: give it her name, and the House of Hope began as a location where broken hearts were intended to be thrown away. Souls locate a family where a single man and 8 shepherds from Germany reinvented what it. How can I be saved? The wind murmured softly through the fields. It had the scent of. Jake stood on the platform of freedom and healing, having coffee on the porch while watching 8 shepherds from Germany sprint over the open. They weren't merely survivors, Ratch. No more. They were all symbols. Each one is a fighter in the plot, and behind each scar represented a soul that resisted. Formally abandoned the House of Hope. Open Friday morning on an overcast day. But within the barn that was converted into a sanctuary, the veterans from all over the world were electrified. Men and women arrived in the country who felt too lost and had seen too much. Jake welcomed everyone with a German shepherd by his side and a handshake. He told a man in a side meet that scout he used to recoil in his wheelchair at every. "This is Luna, and he's our bravest yet." Now, she refused to be touched by anyone. She gives Jake a baby-like hug before approached the final kennel inside. Hope sat quietly and gently, although she had a woman with fire in her eyes. A Navy person called Michelle stood forward. She was a veteran with obvious wounds, and Hope unlocked the gate as invisible Jake did, approached her cautiously before stopping. Then she cocked her head ever so. She put her paw cautiously on Michelle's knee. Michelle started crying, so did Jake. For the upcoming weeks, the House of Hope transformed everything. Dogs and every howl was healed collectively by soldiers. Heard that every tear and every scar were appreciated. Was honored that folks came by plane to meet the ghost of the 8 shepherds of redemption. Turned became a therapy dog. Sarge assisted with. Bravo learned how to retrieve nocturnal terrors. Luna's drugs made her everyone's darkness, but Hope was the one who took everything. Heart. She stood at the flagpole one day, pointing toward the wind and howling so strong and lengthy that everyone halted. It wasn't dread or anguish, rather, it was freedom. Jake mumbled as he observed her. "You brought us back, girl." Following that, unexpectedly, a reporter authored a piece titled "The Marine Who Found and Rescued 8 Dogs." The article on rescue reached Hollywood, a producer, and a publisher. They made Jake an offer based on a movie. When he originally told his story, he joked, "I'm not." He claimed to be an actress, but then he considered regarding the message, regarding what people could sense, the number of lives that this. "Yes," he answered, "but only if the." After a year, the dogs played themselves. Hope Unleashed made its debut at the red carpet. Wasn't for the local theater celebrities, it was for furry heroes. The audience clapped, sobbed, and stood silently as the screen dimmed, went black, and displayed the actual video of 8 German shepherds are scuttling around. The House of Hope is now more than just a sanctuary, is a monthly movement. Every day, more abused canines are brought in. More veterans find peace each month, and each week, Jake responds to people from the outside who claim, "I was broken, but then." He doesn't identify himself as a hero. He doesn't seek recognition. He just awakens each day, takes a stroll around the ranch, murmurs to the breeze, "I'm grateful for allowing me to be human there." And each, you're in the hills when the sun sets, can still make out 8 running shadows through the grass with pride and strength, unstoppable since occasionally the most. The world's most powerful soldiers continue to march. 4 legs and occasionally atonement comes without a uniform, but it does include a bark and another opportunity to tell this tale. If it brought tears to your eyes, it touched your heart. You were reminded of the power of the second opportunities. Don't scroll past and leave a one-word comment below and hope that these dogs and Jake are aware that their story is important. And if you think more people must experience this, hit that. Click the subscribe button now to share actual articles like this one every week, reminding you that life may start once more. Show this video to someone who must have faith restored, since occasionally one story is all it takes to make a difference. Everything, and among them was this.